next presidential hopeful was born in Limerick. He was raised in Clare. He is an academic and a politician and has, over the course of his career, been Mayor of Galway, President of the European Council of Culture Ministers and Minister for Arts, Culture and the Gaeltacht. Would you welcome, please, Michael D. Higgins. What sort of a president do you think you might make?
I hope I would be an inspirational president.
Yeah.
I have, you know, set out a number of aims that I think that the presidency should achieve. An inclusive citizenship, in a creative society, supporting a version of Irishness that's very different from the Irishness of the last 15 years. And then as we move up to the centenary of some great events and some very serious events, that is, for example, the beginning of the Great War, the 1916 Declaration, and so on, that we would have made progress towards establishing what I call a real republic.
Okay, let me ask you about one of the expressions you just used, redefining Irishness.
Yes.
You'll have to explain to me what that means.
Yes, what I think is, and I have, you know, I think I've done 23,000 kilometres now since I got the nomination.
Yes.
And I've been asked that question before. And I'm very straightforwardly saying the kind of Ireland that was represented in the last 15 years by people who had a set of values that suggested that your value was how much you owned, that seemed to neglect the essential equal dignity of every citizen.
Yes.
That kind of Ireland, also in Europe, for example, and around the world, sometimes involved a kind of strutting, where we told on occasion, well, some ministers did, we're the second richest people in the world, you could be like us,
yes,
if only you did the same things. I think it created a version of Ireland that wasn't really drawing on the best of our tradition, nor indeed the potential of our imagination.
Well, that's interesting, because President Mary McAleese, who's widely lauded as being one of the great presidents of recent time, was presiding from the Áras over the very time you speak about. And people would say she didn't do a bad job in the presidency. So what difference will the president make in that respect?
Well, I think that she did an excellent job.
Yes.
I think that Mary Robinson did an excellent job.
But Ireland was, to use your words, strutting while she was president.
Well, I think I'm speaking of ministers, for example.
Well, that's different.
Oh, yes, no,
yes,
it's
but
what
she
I
was
said.
president. In other words, what I'm sorry, forgive me for interrupting, but I am trying to ask you, what could you do as president to
yes,
change the mood music, as it were?
Absolutely, and I think that what one must do is be open about the values that you hold. And I've actually not only spoken about this, but I've demonstrated it. I've said that the way we should live as citizens involves taking the other people into account. In other words, that the definition of everything we do is not in terms of oneself only, but in terms of the social, in terms of cohesion. And when I say I did it, I remember, for example, writing all those years ago about the importance of people having access to the arts and so on.
Yes.
But then when I was a minister, I actually provided about 40 art centres and theatres around the country.
Yes.
I also said as well, you know, it isn't a matter of our cultural institutions being important, but with the assistance of others, including David Andrews as minister, I remember, I bought Collins Barracks for the people. I am committed to the public space, to public institutions.
Let's talk about your key quality for the job. What is your key quality? You're allowed to blow the trumpet now, but what is it? Your key quality, please?
My key quality, I think, is vision.
Vision.
I have independence of mind. I have demonstrated it through all my political life. And also, I think, in fairness, I just say this.
Yes.
I've had courage, because when I started off as a youngster in County Clare, with little opportunities of getting to university and making my way through working in a factory and on through being a clerk in the SB and on to all the universities, what I had in mind then after that was that that wasn't just to be my story, that I would place my story with other people's story, and that's why I went into the public life.
You've an independent streak in you, don't you? You're
yes,
a campaigner, it's fair to say. You're an outspoken politician. You speak your mind, you know your mind. Isn't that right? And yet you want to go into a job which is probably one of the most constrained jobs of them all in this state. How will you deal with those constraints where you can't even go across to London for a weekend without asking permission?
Well, I think that that's one of the advantages I have, that I've been in the cabinet, for example. I know how legislation is prepared, how it goes to the President. For example, last year, about 40 instruments between bills and statutory instruments. That's the regular work. I know the limits of the office, and how would I handle this? You handle it, you remember, you are there, you have a constitutional obligation. You do ceremonial functions that are very important because you're representing Ireland, not yourself.
Wouldn't you be dying to speak your mind? And they're telling you, you can't say that, Michael, you can't do that.
No, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do about that, which is interesting.
Yes?
I think in the third area, where you exercise discretion, I think I have proposed an idea I got from the Erskine Childers presidency. That is to set up a set of seminars which will discuss the issues that matter, but never, you must remember, the presidency is independent of government. It is neither the handmaiden nor the opposition.
And we heard you saying that
government.
during the week, and I appreciate you. Forgive me, but time is against us. I have to cut you off there. Michael D. Higgins, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael D. Higgins. Thank you.